Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
The Cardinals have reported, which means it is time for us to report back to you. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got the Redbird Report here on the 101 ESPN YouTube feed. T-Bone, the big news this week is that Lars Nootbaar has officially reported to Cardinals spring training. And he's a couple of days behind everybody else because he needs this zero gravity machine for him to be able to run on. They now have that at Cardinals camp. They did not have that previously. It has now been delivered, so he's able to go to camp. He spent some time holding court with all of the reporters yesterday, and they asked a lot about, the injury that he dealt with, the pain that it caused him, how it affected his performance, and what it all means, where this is going for Lars Nootbaar. So that's where I want to begin with today's show. We have not spent a ton of time talking about Noot this offseason, other than the potential of a trade for obvious reasons. We didn't know if he was going to be a part of the Cardinals in 2026. Now that it appears that that's going to be the case, let's talk about it. So Noot described what he was going through and said it was basically like when he was walking upstairs or when he was just going about his day-to-day. It would be painful for him because his heels were hurting so badly. So he was able to get that taken care of this offseason. He believes it will make him more athletic. He believes it will allow him to hit better. He believes it will allow him to use his legs in a way that he had not been able to previously. He thinks a lot of his issues were overcompensation issues as well. So hopefully it keeps him healthy with all of the other stuff that he's been dealing with in recent seasons as well. The question that I have relating to this, T-Bone, let's operate under the assumption that Lars Nootbaar basically becomes the player that he was 2 years ago. A plus defender, a good base runner, athletic, and hits 15, 20% above league average. Just a really well-rounded baseball player. The guy that we were talking about as, star potential and could be your version of Brandon Nimmo, who got this $100 million deal from the Mets. Is there a way for him to work his way back into the Cardinals' plans as a member of their core? Because he only has this year and one more remaining on his contract. Is that something that's still attainable for Lars Nootbaar in your mind?
I think it's still possible for him to work his way into the core. Now, right now, as we sit here today having this conversation, my bet would be he's probably a trade candidate when we get to the trade deadline. But I don't think it is 100%, no doubt about it, not a part of the core moving forward. Because I think if he bounces back and then you add in a couple of other factors into the Cardinals build here, I think he can be a part of it. And the reason I say that is because if Jordan Walker doesn't bounce back, then I expect that Joshua Baez is knocking on the door and trying to take his spot in this build moving forward by potentially the trade deadline this year, August, September, however soon he's ready to go. And if that's the case, well, then there's the lane for Baez to get to the big leagues. And that would leave left field still open for Nootbaar to keep locked down in and keep as his position. And the reason I say there's multiple factors that then play into this, if the Cardinals have this build get accelerated by JJ Wetherholt and potentially Ivan Herrera, and you add in the fact that they seem to like what they're doing with the pitching pipeline down in the minor leagues, I don't think you're going to really see the stuff guys this year till we get to about September. When I say stuff guys, I'm talking Sanger, Doyle, maybe Quinn Matthews. We'll see what his development looks like this year. But if Wetherholt is the guy and they see it right away with him, and you have Herrera continue to produce like we have talked about, and him as potentially a guy that can be a middle-of-the-order batter for you, you're talking about having two guys in the middle of your lineup in Wetherholt and Herrera that just need supplementary pieces around them. And Nootbaar's a supplementary piece to where if he plays well and bounces back and you get these other factors that do occur, I still think he's a guy the Cardinals will need as they build this thing forward. As a guy that you could look at into, I understand typically when you're in a rebuild, you're not talking about signing guys to contract extensions that take them into their 30s. But if this thing gets accelerated quicker than we are expecting or the Cardinals are expecting, he suddenly could become a guy that could play into the fact of, okay, we need a guy that's 15% above league average in our outfield because otherwise we don't have answers internally past Joshua Baez. So I do think there's a scenario where he can potentially play himself into this score with other things having to fall in place. Would I bet on that right now? Probably not, but I wouldn't shut the door on, okay, Nootbaar is not wearing a Cardinals jersey by the time we get to 2027.
I'd be pretty shocked if Nootbaar is wearing a Cardinals jersey by the time we get to 2027. And the reasons are like tenfold. One, the age. He's approaching the age of 30. And with where they're at right now, I've been the one that has said all along, I don't think this has to take a 5-year plan, but man, they just traded away Brendan Donovan for a reason. And it's because it's probably going to take a couple of years for them to be competitive again. And it's probably going to take many years for them to get back to like contending for titles again. He's going to be 29 next year. Are you going to sign that guy to a multi-year extension into his 30s? That seems unlikely to me. Beyond that, he's just been unreliable over the course of his career. Maybe he has a great season this year and he puts it all together. And last year he played 135 games despite all of these issues that he had dealt with. So he was able to fight through some of that pain. But previously, 109, 117, 108, he's just not a guy that you can count on to play every day. And that's even before we get to the Hagelin's deformity stuff. So even if he's able to put it all together in what is effectively a contract year for him, I can't trust that that's going to be the case moving forward. So am I going to extend him into his 30s when he just got surgery on both of his feet? Probably not. If he has a great year this year, he will be highly valuable for another team in Major League Baseball that is trying to contend in 2027. So all of this is leading to, okay, he has value across the league. I'm probably not extending him. The price to extend him will be exorbitant because now you're looking at 2025 as the outlier year. It will be easy to explain. Well, he had these Hagelin's deformities. They caused him a lot of pain. He wasn't able to play through it and have as much success as he would have liked. But prior to that, he was a 15% above league average hitter every year of his major league career, and then immediately got right back to that as he was healthy again. So teams across Major League Baseball are going to look at that and say, that's a $20 million a year player. Maybe it's a 3 to 5 year deal, $60 to $100 million. I don't think the Cardinals can rationalize that in good faith. So I like Noot. I have always liked Noot. I think he's been underrated up until last year among Cardinals fans for what he brings. I also think he has a skill set that's somewhat replicable by other guys that are already on the roster. Not to the same degree, but Victor Scott, if he hits this year, he's a guy that gets on base at a pretty good clip. And he's more athletic than a guy like Lars Nootbaar. Could you just put Vic up at the top of your lineup and have 80% of the player at 10% of the cost? I think that's possible. JJ Wetherholt, I think he profiles very similarly to Lars Nootbaar, but with a higher batting average. And these are all left-handed hitters. Burleson, Gorman, Wetherholt, Scott, all batting from the left side. I just don't know that this is something that you're going to want to build around a bunch of different lefties, all with somewhat similar skill sets. I think Lars Nootbaar is playing this year for where he's going to be playing in 2027.
Yeah, and look, I said at the beginning, I expect that right now my bet would be he gets traded because I laid off all the different things that I think have to happen as well. I don't think it is just if Nootbaar plays well, Nootbaar's here for the long run. No, because when you're building a team, it's typically you're looking at, okay, what else do we have in the minor league system? And the other thing that can change this as well, because right now their position player pipeline is pretty bare. It is JJ Wetherholt, Joshua Baez, Rhino Rodriguez. That's about it for their high upside plays in the minor league system right now. And the reason that I bring that up is for right now, it is hard to me to see where this outfield is going. I think Vic, if he's below league average offensively and continues to play elite Gold Glove defense in center, I think that's what carries him to be a part of this moving forward. But like Walker, I have no idea. My guess is he's not a Cardinal next year because I don't expect him to bounce back and hit. So there's where Baez goes. And if you do trade away Nootbaar, I don't see where your replacement is for him in the long term moving forward. Now, the reason I bring that up is that can all change when we get to the draft, right? It could even change in the Nootbaar deal itself. Maybe you get a high upside outfielder in return for him that's at like the AA level that I can go, okay, that's probably their answer moving forward in 2 years. At the draft, they're going to have a high pick. They've got, 5 or 6 picks in the top 75. Okay, maybe that's where they end up getting someone that could potentially fit into being in the outfield solution in a couple of years. That's why I'm not 100% certain that he is a guy that's on the outside looking in on this core, but I am certainly at a low percentage of, okay, yeah, it's going to take a lot for him to A, play his way into it, and B, have a bunch of X factors that put him in it.
When I look at the Cardinals and where they're at, I think the Cardinals outfield is maybe the most unsettled part of their rebuild right now. I think you can see pretty obvious answers in the rotation. Like Liam Doyle has to be a part of the answer in the rotation long term. I think you expect some of these other players that are currently down in their minor league system to be a part of that. Senja, I would say Michael McGreevy is a part of it. I don't think he's like the number one starter or even near the top of your rotation.
But he saves you from spending $15 million and getting the next Kyle Gibson.
Exactly. He's your number 5 starter, and you have cost certainty there along with him. So I think there are obvious answers in the rotation, even if they're not here quite yet. You look at the infield. I think Alec Burleson is an answer. I think JJ Wetherholt is an answer. I think Mason Wynn is an answer. I think somewhere Ivan Herrera will be an answer. I don't know who those players are currently in the outfield. I agree with you. I think Vic could be. I think he could just be a really great defender that gets on base at a decent clip and runs like the wind once he's there. That is valuable. And especially while he's on the pre-arb and early arb years, there's huge value in that monetarily. Corner outfield wise, dude, I have no clue. I don't think it's new. I would bet against it being Jordan Walker. I think it'd be great if it is him, but I would bet against it right now. I think the odds are stacked against that. Maybe Baez can do it, but I'm going to need more than 1 year of evidence to suggest that that's the case. Chase Davis has not had the good early returns that you're looking at. Maybe Ty Pete, who's 19 years old, and they just got him in the Donovan deal as well. Maybe he can become that. Maybe it's somebody we have not talked about at all. Maybe Ray Rodriguez will eventually not be behind the plate, but instead he'll be playing out there in left field. I don't know. And that's the thing. It is so uncertain, and it's been the area that's been most uncertain for a decade.
Yeah.
For the Cardinals, this is not a new issue. It's been a rotating cast of characters for years. They had to try to solve the problem by going out and trading for Jason Hayward and then trading for Marcell Ozuna. And you had Randall Grichuk and Harrison Bader and Carlson, Walker. Think about all of the guys that they've tried out there. Tyler O'Neill, who they traded for as well, giving up Marco Gonzalez in that deal. Like, they've thrown resources at this issue. They have just not been able to solve it. I still don't think they have that problem solved. And that's one of the under the radar storylines for 2026 is not just, hey, at the major league level, what are you getting from these guys? But also from below, is anybody actually going to break through and become the guy that takes this thing and runs with it? Because they've been craving that for a decade and nobody has actually been able to do it. Nobody has been able to earn that spot, stay in that spot, and then earn the contract extension that we're talking about for a guy like Lars Nootbaar. It's time for that to happen. I don't expect it to emerge this season, but it's one of the things that has to in order for them to get out of this rebuild sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and right now, like, I think if you're looking at a position that they're probably going to have to add externally when it comes to when they get back in, let's say it is 2 or 3 years, I think it's probably a corner outfielder. Because, I mean, right now, the only thing you've got outside of what's currently here is Baez, Joshua Baez. Outside of that, there's truly nothing else coming from the minor leagues in the outfield. Chase Davis, I wouldn't plan on that, even though he's a first-round pick. He hasn't shown anything yet at the minor league level that show he's going to be a guy that's an answer there. So I think you're right. I think it is one of their bigger questions in this rebuild. And that's why I was saying Nootbaar might just eventually have to have a body that's out there. You can't move on from everybody when you exit the rebuild. That's why I think there's a chance he falls into this. But yeah, I think the outfield is a big question. I think another one for them as well would be, I still think they're one infielder short, and I'm circling third base. I don't know who the long-term answer is there because I don't see anybody internally that's going to fill that spot, because I'm not banking on a Gorman bounce back. And even if he does, he might even be a candidate, the same as Nootbaar's fate, where you look to move on from him. So JC is a guy that I'm not 100% sure is a everyday big leaguer. I think he might be able to be kind of the utility bench guy that comes off and serves as giving guys days off. And then if Wetherholt's going to be playing second, there truly is not an answer at the hot corner moving forward. So I think those are the two most uncertain spots of the build, but the one that's most important is the outfield, because there's 3 positions that you've got to fill out there in the outfield. If you don't have a third baseman, look at the Arizona Diamondbacks over the last 5 to 7 years. They haven't had an answer at the hot corner for a while. It's why they've kind of churned through and they're now on Nolan Arenado as their answer at third base. If you have one position that's kind of a rotating door, you can get away with it. You can't have an entire outfield not have answers to exit out of a rebuild.
Agreed. The thing that is noteworthy about that, though, the positions we're talking about are traditional power sources. Like, you look at the corner outfield positions, that's where a lot of teams get their power from. Third base, it is a position that has become a real power position across Major League Baseball. And for the Cardinals, if they're going to build around Mason Wynn at short, and JJ Wetherholt potentially at second, JJ's a guy that could have some power, don't get me wrong, but you're talking more, at least based upon the scouting reports, 20-ish
double
home
power
runs. Yeah, a lot of doubles, maybe 20 home runs is kind of what you're looking at there. Mason Wynn kind of similar. A lot of doubles, 15-ish home runs at shortstop. You need third base to become a power-seeking position. Same thing for the corner outfield spots. You've got to get power from there. Otherwise, this is just going to be a build that lacks it, and you don't win in Major League Baseball in 2026 or beyond without having those power sources. So that is something that they are desperate for this season. They project for the fewest home runs in all of Major League Baseball. That is not surprising. But that's where they need to get it from. The other part of this, and this is just kind of related to what they're doing in the outfield for the here and now, because Noot is at least uncertain for opening day. We don't know if he's going to be ready to go. I would say right now the odds are against it. They're doing everything in spring training to see, all right, what works? What can we do here? They have not found that right-handed bat that we talked about all offseason. I don't think they're going to find that right-handed bat in the near future. So Thomas Ajacey, he's getting opportunities out there. Ivan Herrera, he was out there shagging fly balls. Now, we have some information now as to why he was doing that. It was a no-throw day for him coming off of the offseason surgery. He didn't want to just stand around, so he said, I'll go out there in the outfield. Great. I think he should continue doing that. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Jose Fermin getting opportunities in the outfield, and Cesar Prieto was actually today getting opportunities out there as well. I love this, T-Bone. We've seen in the past the Cardinals have been far too reactive. They are not proactive. They are very reactive to things. Jordan Walker, hey, we're going to wait until Nolan Arenado officially tells us he's going to be back for Jordan Walker to move from third to the outfield. Why? God only knows. He was never going to play third base at the major league level. As we're seeing right now, Nolan Gorman was always ahead of him, stacked on the board of future third basemen. So even if Arenado left, it would have been Gorman, not Walker. So why was he still there? I don't know, but that's a previous issue. We've seen this with other guys that they decide, let's cross-train him. Hey, Tommy Edman, go try it out in center field. Let's see what that looks like. Way back in the day. Hey, Colton Wong, just go see what it looks like in the outfield. It was incredibly frustrating, and they wouldn't cross-train these guys, so they would have no prior history of trying it out. Let's see what it looks like with Thomas Ajacey out there. Let's see if maybe there's an easier path for Cesar Prieto to find his way to the big leagues if he's able to capably play in the outfield. What does it look like for Jose Fermin to be a super utility guy that consistently gets chances out there? You're looking for these right-handed bats. Maybe you already have them on the roster. You might as well find out. There's no real downside to doing this.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that they're finally starting to do this because, one, spring training is the time to really find out in this stuff because there is no trophy for winning the Grapefruit League. So it's okay to have a guy that goes out there in the outfield. And you know what? If he looks terrible, well, guess what? You find out, and then you don't have to learn that in the regular season. But I think the most important part, like you said there for Prieto, he's an infielder. Okay, we just talked about the infield and how it feels kind of settled. If you think he's going to be a guy that can be a part of a big league roster, how are you getting him here if he's just an infielder? You have to create these opportunities for these guys, and especially for guys that are athletes, make them versatile, make them utility players. And that's what I love about what they're doing with Sajaci. Is he probably a shortstop / center fielder in this utility role? Maybe not in a pinch he could, but could he be an above average outfielder that can hit from the right side that could help you out this season? Well, let's find out. Let's find out in spring training. And this is how you help create more opportunities for some of these guys that, at times, and Baker didn't really fall into this, but at times we've seen them get a prospect that it's like, okay, that guy might be able to help you out on the bench. Why don't you just bring him up here? And they would say, well, we don't really have a spot for him. Well, they wouldn't create a versatile role for him. They wouldn't have them learning different positions so that they could find a way to work them and make them more valuable here at the big league level. So I'm glad they're finally starting to do this, because this is what the good teams across the sport do. You have these players that can serve in this utility role, that can play multiple positions. It's the name of the game in baseball now. It's almost becoming positionless for a handful of guys. You have to have a utility player on your roster.
So that's the thing. It doesn't have to be everybody. I think the Cardinals in the past have sometimes tried to do it with everybody, where they're like, hey, all of our guys can play all of the positions. No, just let Brendan Donovan play second. He's really good at it. Just allow him to play there. Tommy Edman, just allow him to focus on a position and then allow him to be really good at it, and we can move on from that. That position is now solved. But what you can do is, when I already have JJ Wetherholt at second, and I have Nolan Gorman who's focusing on third, and Mason Wynn, just park your ass at short and do not move. Never go away from that. Alec Burleson, you were in the outfield, you were at first, you were DH. No. You're our first baseman this year. Focus on that. Get really good at it. Wilson Contreras did it a year ago. It worked for him. Now it's going to work for you, Alec Burleson. The guys that are coming off of the bench that are just trying to reach the big leagues, those are the ones that should cross-train everywhere. Thomas Sajaci is exactly the kind of player. Third, short, second, corner, outfield, hell, see what it looks like in center? Great. You're cross-trained everywhere, and if we have a need on any given day, guess what? Go play. And now it becomes a competition between Sajaci and Fermin and Prieto. All three of you guys, you're all going to have an opportunity to see who the best man is that can win this job. So I'm really glad they're doing this. I think it's taken longer than I would have expected it to. I've been asking about the Sajaci and the outfields thing for a year and a half, because it was just very clear. You're so clogged in the infield. Where's the opportunity coming? Where are his at-bats going to come from? First, it was with Arenado, Gorman, Donovan, all of these guys in front of him. And now you're looking at it, and it's the same thing now that JJ Wetherholt is here.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they're doing it. It allows for an opportunity for a guy that's a former top 100 pick. I have no idea what he's going to be in the big leagues. I'd like to be able to find out, and this is their best path to be able to do so. Coming up next here on the Redbird Report, there's been plenty of talk this offseason about Walker, Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson. These are important key players for the future of this Cardinals build. What's your level of optimism at this point for Nolan Gorman? Does any exist? We'll talk about that next here on the Redbird Report. Okay, there's been a lot of talk about Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson. These are key members of the Cardinals core, or at least that's the hope. We have not spent a whole lot of time talking about Nolan Gorman, T-Bone. And he is, I would say right now, slated to be the starting third baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals for 2026. That doesn't mean he's going to be there in 27, but there's no obvious replacement for him in 27. So it's entirely possible that that is indeed the case. I wanted to do a little bit of research earlier today. I like looking back at history to help us inform the future. So over on Baseball Reference, you can do something where you can check out, all right, who are the players that had a similar strikeout rate early in their career to Nolan Gorman? Nolan Gorman strikes out once every 2.6 at-bats. That's not a good rate. That is not where you want to be.
I wonder why people get frustrated with him here in St. Louis.
For context, the entire list of players aged 25 or younger to have that kind of a strikeout rate in, the history of Major League Baseball prior to their age 25 season. And this is with at least, I think it's 1,000 at-bats. Yeah. So guys that had as many at-bats as Gorman, that had a strikeout rate as bad as Gorman at this point in his career, there are 4 of them.
Oh.
Melvin Nieves, who
Never
played in the mid-90s, Miguel Sano, Dave Nicholson, who played in the 60s, and Joey Gallo. That's it. Those are the only
list.
4 guys that had a worse strikeout rate at this point in their career than Nolan Gorman while having this many at-bats. It's not great. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because I was curious, are there guys that, broke out of this and eventually they became really productive major league players despite early struggles? The big strikeout numbers that we're talking about with Gorman, the below league average numbers that he's had so far in his career. He's had a ton of opportunities. This is not a guy that had a lack of runway. He just hasn't made good on those opportunities so far in his major league career. And the guys that are most similar to Gorman at this point in their respective careers are Christopher Morel. Hasn't really worked out. Jack Sawinski, I believe he was just DFA'd by the Pittsburgh Pirates. Chris Davis, who ended up going on to have a relatively successful career, got paid, and then it was a disaster after that. Jared Kelenic, Mike Zunino, and Brandon Marsh. Those are the guys that had kind of similar starts to their careers as Nolan Gorman. It's not perfect. It's not one for one. There's no way to really get that, but similar. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence, T-Bone. As I read off those names, most of them didn't figure it out. Most of them were just either that or worse the rest of their career. So I'll ask you the question that we talked about going into this segment. Is there reason for optimism with Gorman, or are we just resigned to this being who he is?
I am just resigned to this is who he's going to be at this point in his career. Look, it's twofold for me. One, I think it's not just that the Cardinals do this, but organizations like to sell this idea on a player that was a top-end prospect for a while. In the case of the Cardinals here now 4 years with Nolan Gorman, that, oh yeah, he can figure this all out. He can piece this all together. I hate to say this. I think most baseball players, you have an idea of what they are after about 1,000 plate appearances. And it's so hard to change what you are as a player in baseball because it's so hard to freaking hit, right? It takes a special human being and a special athlete to do what guys like Corbin Carroll and Shohei Ohtani and the best of the best do. I don't see this changing for Nolan Gorman. I think at this point in his career, this is who he's going to be. And I would add this out as well. I fear that the best attribute for Nolan Gorman that he will bring to the table, the tool that will be his best attribute for whether it's the Cardinals or any team, is the pure power from the left side. That is his best tool, is his power. I think we saw at times this past season when the Cardinals were working with him on trying to cut down on the strikeout rate, he didn't have that power as much. It almost is, if he can fix it, I think you almost sacrifice too much power to really make up for his value as a baseball player. Because if you pull down his power, he doesn't hit for a good enough average, he doesn't get on base at a good rate, and it's not like he's a Gold Glove defender. He's a arguably below average defender at third from what we saw at the end of the year, and maybe slightly above average at second base. So his one tool is his power, but you can't take that away from him. So I think this is who he is. So you have to determine, can we somehow get closer to what he was in 2023 when he was 16% above league average, struck out a lot, but he hit 27 home runs and he slugged 478. That's the guy you've got to find. I don't think you can ask him to cut down the strikeout rate at a significant portion because I think you're then just cutting out his power.
The first 2 years of Chris Davis's career, he was a guy that averaged per 162 games, 32 home runs, 95 ribbies, and a 790 OPS. And then over the next 3 years, absolute disaster for the Texas Rangers and Baltimore Orioles. Just not a good hitter. And then suddenly it clicked. He was 27 years old. He's on the Baltimore Orioles and has a MVP caliber season that year. Finishes with 53 homers, 140 RBI, and is one of the most feared hitters in all of Major League Baseball. And then he basically becomes that for the next few seasons. Has a OPS around 800 or better over the next 3 years. So for a 4-year stretch, was a hell of a player on those really good Baltimore Oriole teams. That was after he left Texas. Texas decided to give up on him, and he found himself once he got to Baltimore. My guess is Texas probably looks back and says, would have liked to have seen that here. Yeah. Wish that we could have been able to extract that value the way that Baltimore ultimately did. Now, they don't wish that they had the contract that Baltimore signed him to, but the production would have been nice. Do you have any fear of that? Of the Cardinals, this year it maybe is just fine, like middling, and then they decide to move on, and somebody else gets these age 27 to 30 seasons that the Baltimore Orioles were able to get out of Chris Davis, and the Cardinals could be giving up on a guy like Nolan Gorman, because they're lacking that power. They need it from somewhere, and he's really the only guy that seems to have that kind of potential, at least.
There would be a little bit of fear in me of doing that, because I do believe that the power is in there, and if for whatever reason you can finally get it to click, he will be able to do that kind of damage and make you regret moving on from him. But at the same time, at some point, I have to just admit we can't figure it out, and he can't unlock it here. And for whatever reason, he needs a change of scenery. And I don't know anything about Gorman from behind the scenes. I don't know if it is Gorman's not making the adjustments that the Cardinals are telling him, and maybe he needs the shock to the system of being, released or traded to another organization. But I think it's some time at any professional sport, some guys just won't figure it out with their original organization. And I don't know if that's the organization's fault, the player's fault, a little bit of both. But at some point, you can't just keep giving up at-bats and giving him opportunities just to watch him do the same thing over and over again. And I think the same is true for Walker. I'm terrified that if Walker leaves the Cardinals organization, it will actually click for him, because he's a freak athlete, right? I mean, we talked about him. He's like a 5-tool player almost. He's 4 of the tools, and if he can get the defense going, then he would be a 5-tool player. But at some point, I have to just admit, you know what? We couldn't do it. And if someone else can, tip your cap to him, and they were able to figure it out, what you then really have to do is ask the question internally, why couldn't we do it? And I think that's where the Cardinals have kind of already gotten to at this point with both Gorman and Walker, but they're still willing to at least try it one more time with the staff and the new changes that they're making internally. But yes, I do have some of that fear, but I think at some point you just have to wave the white flag and say we couldn't do it.
And I think with Gorman, it's kind of similar to the conversation we had with Nootbaar. Well, there's no reason not to try it again. Same thing with Walker. Like, what, are we going to give Nathan Church those at-bats? We're going to prevent Walker from getting opportunities because we've got to see what Thomas Saggese is right now. We've got to find out today. No, you're not going to do that. Saggese doesn't have that kind of upside. Saggese's like, he's a hit tool guy. He's super aggressive. Maybe he hits for a little bit of power, but more likely it's a high average, low on base, decent pop, and can play all over the place, which there's value in that. But it's not the same upside as, hey, Nolan Gorman could hit 40 home runs for you. Yep. Hey, Jordan Walker could hit 270 with 25 homers and 15 stolen bases. Like, that is a different level of player than what we're talking about with some of these other guys. And with Gorman, like, I think it's the reason why they were correct in trying it again this year, and maybe even again in 2027, depending on what happens with him this year. There's nobody tearing down the door. There's nobody that you look at in their minor league system at third base and say to yourself, like, we got to get that guy more opportunities, and we're missing out on Cesar Prieto or Thomas Saggese or whoever else, I guess Jose Fermin. And that's what we're blocking with Nolan Gorman. Like, I would just keep trying it for now. If you have somebody that tears down the door and they say, we cannot be denied, this is our opportunity. Hell, if it's Saggese or Fermin or whoever, I don't care. But if somebody is able to prove that in limited opportunities, great, give them a chance. But for right now, like, I've got to find out. Can I get that power production that this team is severely lacking by giving him one last chance to be able to crack the real lineup on this team long term?
Yeah, like if Donovan was a guy that was in the pre-arbitration process, right, and was a second baseman for the Cardinals, you then would look at the infield and go, well, where are we creating a spot for JJ Wetherholt? And you would circle Gorman at that point and go, Gorman's the odd man out. Is it possible we live to regret this move? Yeah, it's possible. But we believe in JJ Wetherholt, and we've given 1,500 plate appearances to Gorman, and he hasn't figured it out. Then it'd be a different conversation. But you're right. They don't have that guy internally right now. If he doesn't hit again in 2026 and there still isn't an answer at third base, then yeah, it will become a real conversation of, do you try it again with Nolan Gorman? Now, that will frustrate the hell out of fans, and I get it, but you're in a rebuild still. So you still are looking to try and figure this out with Gorman. And I will find him fascinating if it all does click this year, because if it does, and he does put together, I'll just even use the placeholder for what he did in 2023. If he's 27 homers, 76 RBIs, and has an 805 OPS this season, that's a really good player. Would I bet on him repeating that again? I wouldn't. But if you don't have answers internally at third base, what do? Do you run it back with him, or do you try and sell high? The thing that the Cardinals hadn't done in the Mo era, which was, hey, this player has some value on the market. Do we move him out? And the answer for the Cardinals, let's just hoard all of our assets and see what happens. And then they'd move on from Carlson and O'Neill when they were at their lowest. So he will be interesting, if it all clicks, what their plan is with him going into the following season.
And he's fascinating because he would then be where Donovan was this offseason.
Yeah.
Where you have 2 years remaining on your contract. So you're making that decision of, are we building around this guy? And if so, do we give him a contract extension, or do we just play this thing out through the ARB process? Or do we sell him coming off of a really good season while his value is high and while contractually he's not a rental for just the 2027 season? So there are more teams that could get in on the bidding process here. Like, for example, a team like Kansas City could be interested in Nolan Gorman. Seattle could be interested in Nolan Gorman, as we just saw with the Brendan Donovan sweepstakes. Like, he is somebody that would make sense then for basically everybody across Major League Baseball. But then does he just make sense for you if he's going to have that kind of a season? That would be my bet, but it would be a really fascinating discussion. Gorman, I would be more likely to buy into Gorman being a part of the Cardinals core than Lars Nootbaar. I know that sounds kind of strange, but it's easier for me to see that path than it is for me to see the path with Lars Nootbaar getting back into their plans for 2027 and beyond.
Yeah, and it helps that he's a little bit younger than like Nootbaar. You mentioned if you sign him to a contract extension, he'll be going on 29 you're going into free agency. For Gorman, he will be 27. So in theory, if you even did a 5-year deal, he's 32, which is basically about that time where that aging curve really starts. So yeah, I would agree with your sentiment there. He would make a little bit more sense at the core than Newt.
Okay, so we think we know at this point. Gorman's your third baseman, Wynn at short, JJ Wetherholt almost certainly at second. They are saying all of the right things. I understand why they have to do it, but as JJ Wetherholt consistently gets opportunities at second throughout the early portion of spring training, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's probably your opening day starting second baseman. They have not provided anybody that would create any kind of obstacle to that taking place. Alec Burleson's at first. We think the first crack at catcher is going to be Ivan Herrera. Right's Jordan Walker. Center is pretty much spoken for with Victor Scott, and then left field is probably one of Lars Nootbaar or Thomas Saggese, depending on how the health goes for Lars Nootbaar. I just gave you your opening day lineup, basically. Throw somebody at DH and let's go. What are the jobs actually up for grabs this spring, T-Bone? Because we're about to see our first spring training game on Saturday, and there's got to be something that's there, right? Like, what are we watching these games for when it comes to the competition that exists, or does one exist in your mind?
I think there's a couple that exist, but they're not the ones that are like fun and sexy. And, I think it's the back end of the bullpen, or not the back end, but like the long relievers / middle relievers that you're looking at, because they've got so many different options that they can throw at the wall and see what sticks this year. So I think you're looking at that, but does that competition really matter when you can just run the Memphis shuttle for most of the year? Not really.
It matters for the guy that was the Rule 5 pick.
Yeah. He's really about it. Then you're looking at the back end of the rotation. I think that's a little bit of a competition between Leahy, Fitz, Dobbins, if he ends up getting into games in spring, which I would think he's going to. He's already kind of starting to throw. So that'll be...
Throw Palante into that mix as well.
Palante as well. He'll fit into this. And if he loses on that, then he's going to go battle for a bullpen role. And then outside of that, like on the position player side, I guess it's for the last spot on the bench, because like right now, I'm just going to write in Nootbaar as the left fielder, even though he may not be ready for opening day. Just put him in there because it helps kind of make this a little easier. So Pages will be your backup to Herrera. Pozo is your right-handed bat that's on the bench, first base, DH, maybe your opening day DH. So JC is a guy that's going to be, I think, in the utility role this year. And then there's one more spot that's open. I don't know who that is. That's probably the battle of Nathan Church. If they want to, if JC can't play center field, Church is probably the guy that maybe gets on the roster to play that spot when Scott needs a day off. Prito, is he a guy that can show a little bit of versatility? So you have another guy that can be in that utility role.
Fermin's going to make this roster. He's out of options. So I think Fermin's going to be up.
I wouldn't guarantee Fermin makes the roster because he could easily be a DFA candidate, but he's going to battle for it too. I was going to bring him up as well. That's the competition you're looking at. So if you really want to watch Fermin versus Prito versus Church, that's your fun spring training battle.
I'm being honest, I'm not sure that that's even a battle because like path of least resistance, I don't think they have a backup center fielder. So I think Nathan Church is going to be there. They don't have to send Prieto through waivers. So I think Prieto's going to start the year down in the minors. And I think Fermin is the guy that is on your bench. And I think they start the year with Lars Nootbaar on IL. So your roster is basically set. When we get to spring training on the position player side of things, I really don't think that there is any legitimate competition on that side. There's no starting spots available other than DH on opening day. Maybe that's a spot that like Prieto, Pozo, Fermin, whoever else you want to throw into the mix, you could maybe have that be competition, so to speak. But beyond that, yeah, man, I think it's really, in terms of tangible, meaningful spots that are up for grabs, I think it's just the last couple of spots in the rotation. And I think they're going to have 6. So even that one it's less scarce than you would typically expect with a 5-man where they have to choose quickly. I think they're going to start out the season with a 6-man rotation. So there will only be really one man that is looking on the outside in that starts the year at AAA.
And it feels like, because you said they're going 6-man, it feels more like a 2-month-long competition. Spring training, as you build up, you're kind of competing. And then when you get into April, then you really are competing. And then if they finally switch to a 5-man, which I think they would eventually, then you're starting that conversation. I think the only thing that can really make the bench one more compelling, in air quotes compelling, is if they do add a right-handed bat. Heim keeps talking a little bit about it. At this point, I don't know if I feel confident that they're going to do that. But if they did bring in someone like Grichuk, for example, okay, well, now Grichuk's definitely taken on one of those roles, and now there is a competition between like Church, Prito, and I don't think so JC would be, but Fermin would be another one that then have to compete. But again, that's all relying on if they actually go out and add the right-handed bat that they've been talking about all offseason.
So that is the competition side of things. We mentioned we think JJ Wetherholt is very likely to be one of the starting position players for you on opening day, likely at second base. Is he an extension candidate for the Cardinals at spring training? And if not, who is? Do they have one of those annual spring training extension candidates on this year's roster? We'll talk about that coming up next here on the Redbird Report. So the annual tradition for the Cardinals used to be you get to spring training and somebody gets announced as an extension. We saw this with Colton Wong years ago. They did it with Paul DeJong, Carlos Martinez. It felt like every year it was clockwork. You'd get there, guys would report, you get through the first week of spring training, they play a couple of games, and then they set up the chairs and they're out there in the 40-mile-an-hour wind trying to explain why they decided to extend this individual player. So we've seen that in the past. That has kind of gone to the wayside. They've gone away from that in recent years where they decided, you know what, maybe we shouldn't extend these young players so early. Do they have an extension candidate in your mind this offseason, T-Bone? Is there somebody that as they are now at spring training within the next few weeks, you could see getting an extension?
So I think there are 2 guys that I would throw out as candidates for this. I think the odds are they're not going to do this in this rebuild, but I think if they were, and Heim came to me and said, who should we extend, Tanner? And after I yelled, you shouldn't extend anybody, I would go, there's 2 names that are at least in this conversation. I think the first one is Mason Wynn. If you believe that, hey, the offense was down last year because of the knee and he can become a, 10% above league average bat, which I think is in the range of outcomes for him, while also playing Gold Glove level defense, I could see where you convince yourself, okay, let's try and get this guy paid because that'll be a guy that's valuable across the sport and would get a decent paycheck when he goes to free agency. So I could see where Mason wins on that list. The other guy might surprise people that I'm going to bring up. I think JJ Wetherholt is the second, if not the first guy that's on the list in these extension talks. And the reason that I say that, if you truly believe what the Cardinals are selling, and if the Cardinals believe that, hey, this guy is potentially a stud that's playing second base, hitting from the left side, and is maybe the star that we've been looking for, I wouldn't be shocked if they maybe said, why not get ahead of this and lock in our cost certainty on him? Buy out the years of arbitration and get him at a cheap rate when he is post arbitration, quote unquote, in this contract, like the Brewers did with Jackson Chourio. I think he's one of the guys that, if you're going to talk about contract extensions, has to be thrown into this, because outside of that, like, I wouldn't do Burley just because I like Burley, but Burley's playing a position that teams don't really value in first base. Herrera's, I like the bat. What's his future position? I have no idea, and I'm not sure that they know exactly. There's no pitcher worth a contract extension that you're talking about, and there's nobody else outside Herrera and Burley and Wynn that I would throw here. So I think Wetherholt is a guy that, if they're talking contract extensions, I think he would be up on that list just so they can lock in cost certainty and get him at a cheaper rate for both the arbitration process and for those first couple of years in free agency if they went that far.
I like the thought experiment, if nothing else, where this would be creative. And it's the kind of thing they really haven't done before. We talked about it a little bit when Jordan Walker came up of, hey, do you consider just saying, this guy's going to be a superstar, let's make sure that he's here for the next decade? The answer was no, and that was a smart thing to do. They opted against, and thank God they did. The Brewers did this. Jackson Chourio was ready to go at the major league level. They said, we've never seen you hit a baseball against a major leaguer. We don't care. You're a stud. Let's go ahead and get you locked in. They signed him to an 8-year deal worth $82 million. You now look at that and the total amount of money, you think to yourself, well, that's a steal for the Brewers. And it is. Like, it's a really good deal. But then you actually look at it. You look at the nitty gritty of how that breaks down. So he went through the pre-arb process, or what would have been his pre-arb process. And in those years, he made $2, $4, and $7 million. That's far more than he would have made previously through the pre-arbitration process, like $10 million more than what he would have made in the pre-arb process. Then in the arbitration process, what would have been there for 3 seasons, they had him scheduled for $8, $9, and $15 million. If you are a really good baseball player, that's pretty similar to what you make in the arbitration process. By year 3, if you're excellent, you're talking $25 million as a position player through the arbitration process. Maybe that changes by 2029, but that's kind of the current outlook for those guys. So are they getting a bit of a discount there? Maybe, it's possible. Then you get into the years that they bought out of his free agency season, starting at his age 26 season, $16 million and $17 million. If he's really good, that's a huge discount compared to what he would get on the open market. But then you have a couple of club options at $25 million a piece. So the reason I bring this up, he better be really good to make that worth it. And Jackson Chourio has been, so it's worked out for them. I think this would be the kind of deal you'd be looking at for JJ Wetherholt to sign. Because otherwise, if I'm his agent, I would just say, JJ, you're a really good player. Let's go through this process. You're not hurting for money right now. You were a top 10 draft pick. You got a pretty significant bonus. It's not a situation where you're coming from nothing and you need money right now, and it changes your life and everybody else's. Like, for a lot of these guys, especially that come internationally, that's part of the process, is they're signing these contracts to be able to get this guaranteed right now. For JJ Wetherholt, he's been preparing for this for a really long time. And he didn't go through the amateur free agency path or anything like that. No, you were a top 10 pick, man. I don't think he would sign this unless he gets something similar or better than what Jackson Chourio signed for. And in that scenario, if I'm the Cardinals, I would say no thanks. I need to see a year of this first, because you would have to be so good to make this worth our while. I would just rather play it through the ARB process for now. And then if you show me this year, you're excellent. If I'm being honest, I've been burned so many times by other Cardinals players, I'd probably want to see it the second year as well. And then we can talk extension. And is that going to cost me money? Yeah, it is. It's going to cost me a hell of a lot of money. But the Cardinals should be able to afford that. They have basically completely clean books starting in 2028. I'm not sitting here saying they need to sign one of these. I think this is more valuable for the Brewers than it should be for the Cardinals. So I would avoid it. I understand the idea of it, and it's a fun conversation to have. But if I'm in Chaim Bloom's shoes, I don't have a whole lot of interest in signing a guy like JJ Wetherholt to an extension today.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do hardly any contract extensions. The one guy that I was willing to was Walker. And like you said, it's a good thing they didn't do that. I want to see him play at the big league level first. But you have to realize the more... It just takes 1 year for it to really explode on what that contract extension looks like. Look at what it ended up becoming for Bobby Witt. He didn't really figure it out in year one. They didn't do a contract extension. He figured it out in year two in a big way and got a huge payday to where he's already locked in 7 years and $140 million. And that's, I said he locked that in because he can opt out of it after that. Same with Julio Rodriguez. You look at Julio's deal. He put together a really good year, and he got 12 years and $209 million on that extension. That does include an opt-out in there as well. But
only 4 more years, $120 million. That's basically 30 a year compared to what we talked about with Jackson Chourio. If they're that good, I'm fine with that. I'm good to pay a guy $30 million if I know you're great. You're taking such a huge gamble by not knowing how these guys will translate to the major league level to sign them to that Jackson Chourio contract. I just don't think it's something the Cardinals need to do. I think it is something that if you're the Brewers, you need to do. I don't think the Cardinals should have to.
Yeah, and two things. I think one, Chaim will have a better sense on this than us externally, yep. Which is, are they really going to be able to do what you're saying in future years of be willing to pay a guy $30 million? Because BD3 and Junior have said all the right things right now. Yeah, when we're competitive and we're in a winning window, sure. Yeah, once we get our revenue, we'll be willing to do it. Although we didn't actually have to do this. It just happened to coincide with our TV deal falling apart and attendance going down. They may know already internally, hey, we're not going to be able to get back to our $180 million payroll that we had in the past. And if that's the case and Chaim knows it, it becomes a much more interesting conversation for him, like what you were saying with the Brewers. And the second thing, too, that I just thought of in my head, and again, I want to point out first off when I bring up this idea, they didn't have room to make this work last year, but look at what Arizona did with Corbin Carroll. And the reason I point to them is they at least got a month to figure out if Carroll was a big leaguer, gave him the cup of coffee in September and went, holy crap, this guy's a stud. We should extend him right now. The Cardinals didn't go that path this last September of JJ Wetherholt. And the reason I say they couldn't have done, they had nowhere to play him.
Correct.
So they at least had that excuse as something, but it is something that you look back on and say, boy, I wonder if they could have found a way to get a cup of coffee for him. They could have had more data points to figure out if they wanted to do an extension with him or not.
But you mentioned the other player that at least would be under consideration for this, and that's Mason Wynn. I find him to be far more interesting as an extension candidate. I don't think they're going to do it, but you look at the guys that are kind of similar to him that got contract extensions relatively recently. Ezequiel Tovar with the Colorado Rockies signed for 7 years, $63 million in total. Jacob Wilson just signed a deal, 7 years, $70 million for him. Now that I'd be willing to do. I'd probably sign up for that with a guy like Mason Wynn. I just have so few questions about what he's going to be. And to kind of break this down on how it works for Jacob Wilson's contract, which I think would probably be more similar. You're talking about $1 million, $1.5 million is where he's at this season. And he's at basically the exact same spot in his process as Mason Wynn. Then it jumps up to 3, 5, 9, 12, end of arbitration. Then you get into the years of free agency that you're effectively buying out. 17, 19, and a club option at $26 million. I'd do that. You're basically talking about 2 years, $36 million for Mason Wynn after the end of his ARB years. Takes him into like the early, basically like 30 years old. I would probably be willing to do that with Mason Wynn. I think that's the going rate for an above average shortstop in Major League Baseball, and I think Wynn is that.
Yeah, I'm not willing to do it yet on Mason Wynn just because I'm not really sure what I think is his ceiling yet. And I think this year was a fluke for him offensively. I got to see him prove it first, though, right? I think it is easily tied to his knee. If he's below league average offensively, I think at the shortstop spot, you still have to be above average. Because as much as we just talked earlier in the podcast about the corners or traditional powers spots and lineups, man, look at shortstops across the league. That is a incredibly deep position right now. So I wouldn't do it for Mason Wynn. I will say the one thing that could help him from the Cardinals perspective, at least, is we talked on our show, BK and Ferrario, earlier this week. Sounds like Mason Wynn's kind of maybe at least growing into, maybe molding into, maybe becoming a clubhouse leader. If he can take on the role of Brendan Donovan as the clubhouse leader or the guy that provides energy within the clubhouse, and then is also your premier defense shortstop that maybe is 5 to 10% above league average, but he fits into the age frame of your core moving forward, I could see where then the Cardinals get the appetite and say, you know what? Yeah, let's give him the Jacob Wilson deal and see if we can make something happen.
Cardinals are back in action this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. We've got actual Cardinals baseball on the television. Who could have seen it? We have finally arrived. We are closer and closer to the official start of the Cardinals season. We're going to be along with you guys for the ride once again in 2026. We cannot wait to do so, as next time we talk, we'll have real baseball to be able to break down. For Tanner Hendrickson and Zane, who is always with us on the video side of things, I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you guys next time on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.